Hello, and welcome to another Friday and an edition of Moments with Mindleaps. My name is Rebecca Davis, and I'm the founder of Mindleaps, and I love these Friday conversations when we get to meet with some of the most interesting and fascinating people around the world, using the arts, using research, using new diplomacy tools to build connections around the world. And we are very excited today to be joined by Adriana is one of the most amazing young women I've met recently, and she has this fascinating work history bringing her. Hi, Adriana.
Hi, Rebecca. How are you?
Oh gosh, I miss you.
So good to see you.
I was just starting to tell our guests that it's been such a pleasure to get to know you recently, and a young woman who has traveled so far and has so many interesting thoughts that the world needs to hear today around international relations and international development and the power of languages, from Morocco to Afghanistan to New York City and other places in between there. Adriana, thank you so much for joining us.
Of course. Thank you, Rebecca. And Rebecca has been such a mentor of mine as well. So it's been such a pleasure to follow along with her journey and Mindleaps as well. So excited to be here. Thank you.
You can only truly say that once I can finally speak like some Arabic sentences to you.
It's fine. I heard you say one word one time on a 5 a.m. Zoom
Shukran.
call.
Oh my gosh, if we start off with Arabic, this interview might be very short. Adriana, tell us a little bit about the educational journey, which is tied quickly to Peace Corps, which I think so many people think, including me, is really kind of a founding or fundamental experience for young people and understanding the world. Brought you to Morocco. Maybe a little bit of that journey, some of the takeaways you've brought from that now.
Of course, yeah. Well, I think I joined Peace Corps back in 2017, which for those of you who don't know, it's a US organization that works to promote soft power and cultural understanding of a specific country, as well as tied along with a project. So I was working on youth development programming for 2 years in a rural area of Morocco. And the most exciting part for me was the fact that it wasn't just an experience where I was traveling somewhere, which I was kind of ready to get to that next step and integrate myself somewhere and really focus on listening to a place in that culture, in that language, which then, like Rebecca said, led me to stumble in Arabic for a really long time. But eventually, 9 months in, really started to be able to communicate with the host family and really participate in some of those Moroccan cultural norms and traditions like Ramadan and Eid and things like that. So that was a lot of organizing and developing educational programming with youth in Morocco, which was fascinating, really listening to youth there. And, if there was an idea around a creative writing workshop or an English class, like really offering youth the tools and the space to work on that in their own communities. So I did that for 2 years, which taught me so much about the world and just listening to others. And then after Peace Corps in Morocco, came back to the US for a little while and met Rebecca and worked on Mindleaps for a bit, which was amazing, and really had the opportunity to join Mindleaps in a really interesting time. It was, April, May, June of 2020, and Mindleaps was really one of the first, I think, to start figuring out how education can be transitioned to a remote platform and how specifically to measure that, I mean, we're having WhatsApp conversations in, a chat, delivering a curriculum over WhatsApp, over low bandwidth. And WhatsApp was really, it was incredible to just witness. And I think Mindleaps was on that train to really figuring out how to use remote learning for educational purposes. And we know we're seeing that play out now. So, yeah, that's where
Yeah.
Peace
Oh my
Corps,
gosh.
post-Peace Corps kind of led me.
So many pieces. I mean, Peace Corps, like I remember when you were first recommended by our good friend Gary Shea from Save the Children. And, the first thing he said is, she's former Peace Corps. And we were like, great, send her our way. It's just such a
Yeah.
wonderful organization that really helps people get integrated at the field level, at the grassroots level. like very true shaping experiences that I think, you know, kind of both of us have talked about how important that is, especially for Americans, as we look to the more complex world, to not just have kind of this idea of tourism, but this idea of like building cultural understanding.
Yeah, and to
One
really be,
day,
yeah, yeah, to be put out of your comfort zone. I mean, that was the first time that I felt like, I wasn't speaking and people were like, "Oh, great job," like I was saying the wrong thing or I was speaking wrong in Arabic or, I was figuring it out and it felt, especially into this industry of international development and working with an NGO, it felt like a important next step to be able to work in a country and actually listen to local leaders and figure out and measure programs in that specific country. So Peace Corps, I really would recommend to this day. I think it's an incredible program, and it teaches you a lot personally and professionally too.
yeah, and me too. I just truly echo all of that. And if I had it to do again, I ended up on Fulbright, but gosh, Peace Corps would have been a really good decision. Maybe my
Fulbright's amazing too. They're kind of rivals, but
we should move on from the rivalry of U.S. state programs.
that could go on forever.
Yeah, so we talked a lot about some of the work that we did together. Mindleaps was super fortunate to have Adriana willing to come on and help us build with us this virtual academy, which was really kind of just exactly as you summarized so beautifully, a way to get people online early on, especially youth in developing countries, as COVID hit, and in a way that was actually accessible. Kind of really starting with what's practical and building enthusiasm and interest from there. So, we still cite so much of your work in developing the virtual academy. You should be very proud of it, Adriana. Now it's grown and it's happening all the time, and Martha constantly gives references to you every
I
time
love it.
we start new groups in Uganda. So thank you for
It
all
was 5 a.m. I remember waking up, I think, because of the time difference, and you guys were the students were doing like project share outs for the businesses that they were developing. And I was sitting in New Jersey and it was like 5:30 a.m. and just being in the middle of the Zoom with students who just developed like entrepreneurship ideas in Guinea and Rwanda. Like it was fascinating. I loved every second of it.
And you should know, Adriana, that Annette's chapati business is still running and thriving in Uganda.
I am obsessed. That video where she recorded, one of the Mindleaps students recorded a video, like basically marketing what she was doing. And she came to the video with like such confidence, like, I'm creating this business. I just have the tools to do it. And I am going to start it in my community, which is like what we love to see. It was a great thing.
Totally. I mean, it's interesting how when the tools are put in the hands of youth, this new level of empowerment just comes through with very little pushing on the outside.
Yeah, and just using tools too, like social. I mean, I know I feel like an old person compared to like what people 17, 18, 19 are using to, promote a business, or, speak out on an issue. So it's using those digital tools, I feel like, is going to be more important. And it's great to see, people learning how to use them in like a competent and proficient way too.
Yeah, and finally starting to kind of crack that access gap that's been so huge, and really making sure that people around the world are starting to connect to those tools is really, I think, going to be a game changer for communications around the world. Yeah.
For sure, for sure.
Adriana, I remember speaking about the power of all of these tools online. I had the privilege of watching some amazing Instagram highlights from your time in Afghanistan, and thinking oh my gosh, I can't believe how lucky we are to kind of watch this experience from your time in such a fascinating country, such an important region of the world. A little bit before it's gone into this new phase right now, which maybe we'll touch on too. But take us back a little bit to when you joined Free to Run, a wonderful organization in Kabul and other parts of Afghanistan, and what that first experience was as you started work in Afghanistan.
Yeah, for sure. I after Peace Corps and then after Virtual Academy and working with Mindleaps, I really started to figure out that I was really interested in educational programming and even using sport and different types of engagement to work with youth and develop different types of skills. So building off of what I did with Peace Corps, there were life skills curriculums and a hike actually to the highest peak in North Africa with five
Oh, wow.
girls who I see Shema and Lubna are watching. Salam alaikum. And yeah, so going off of there, that kind of led me to look at sport and ways that you can engage youth. So I found an organization called Free to Run and went to Kabul in February. And they're an organization that works with youth leaders in 5 provinces of Afghanistan and empowers girls through sport in public spaces. So it was a really, yeah, a unique opportunity. And I have met some of the most incredible women in Afghanistan. And I mean, women who were running ultra marathons or pushing the boundaries in their communities and doing a run outside or organizing women to run a marathon out in Afghanistan in public, which takes a lot as a woman. So I think that experience, I was there for about 5 months, and you know, building curriculum as well as attending programming and monitoring it, and then also working with our national staff. It reminded me a lot of Mindleaps in that it was so nationally led. We had 36, 37 national staff and 1 to 2 foreigners. So, I mean, listening to our Afghan colleagues and, you know, the issues that they've had or the things that inspire them. So many 25, 26, 27-year-old youth who were really passionate about what they were doing, and it was inspiring. And I think it's unfortunate to see, it's heartbreaking as to what's happening right now, and knowing that so many young Afghans have, you know, spoken out and participated in the public sphere, and now what's happening is, you know, there's a threat and a risk to that. So my heart goes out to, you know, all of the Afghans right now and what they're going through.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, absolutely. It is so important to underscore how important this particular time is in this country's history, and also to recognize, you know, where international help has not been there when needed, and good decision making has not been there when needed, and yet still how often the local youth are the ones who are so brave to just keep fighting
Hmm.
forward and keep trying to like educate like people on the outside to
Yeah.
understand what's really happening.
Yeah.
Adriana, like if it's possible, and I know it's kind of a sensitive topic. I mean, what do you think that we as Americans, like someone like me, have never been there? What do we
Hmm.
think about Afghanistan that's actually like not true, or what are those stereotypes that you were like, oh my gosh, like Americans think this and they
Oh
shouldn't
man.
be.
It was funny actually. I had the opportunity to go to Kandahar, which is a city down south, where if you know you were in the military or following history like 10, 15 years ago, you probably heard a lot about Kandahar. It was where the Taliban had kind of established their stronghold when they were in power. And I had the opportunity to go there with an organization and, you know, build up and listen to women training. It was kind of like a trainer for trainers. So they were training this curriculum on how to teach their fellow community members and women. And I was in Kandahar driving around, you know, in my mind, this very conservative city. And I was driving in a car and I passed a place called like New York Kentucky Fried Chicken. And I just like took a photo of it and I was so confused. Like, as far as Afghanistan seems to some people and as like out there as it is, I mean, I was just surprised as to how, you know, it's a modern country. There's, you know, there's a cosmopolitan city, there's coffee shops, there's restaurants, movie theaters, and it was, it shocked me to be able to see, you know, in Kabul especially, a layer of life happening despite the fact that there's been trauma, layers of trauma and war. So people, I mean, people live on, unfortunately. And I mean, the city was incredible. The mountains, I think, were one of the biggest things that I remember, just the nature. And there's one city actually called Bamiyan, and they're famous for cycling, they're famous for running, they're famous for all these different types of things. And it was really cool to be able to see places like that in a country that in the US, you know, we have such altered connotations of what Afghanistan, you know, looks like. So.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. That's like kind of when I wish like Moments with Mindleaps wasn't like a 20-minute Instagram program, but like maybe like a 4-hour mini documentary where we could get to
There's so
the heart of
much.
all of those sentences. And Adriana, now, you know, again, recognizing that, you know, it's very, very deep in your heart and very recent in your history. I mean, what is it now that you can advise us as Americans to do for the Afghan cause to, you know, recognize and celebrate these youth who are showing resilience yet again? What can we do now?
I think, I mean, as Americans, there's so much we can be doing. And, you know, the first thing is, I think, listening to Afghans. We, you know, in foreign policy and as Americans and from the West, there's a tendency to, you know, come in and act like we know what we're doing and understand a place. And even I fully don't understand Afghanistan. It's a really complex place, but I saw in so many instances, there were situations where, you know, Afghan voices were being drowned out by different types of actors. And I think the first thing we can do is listen to Afghans and listen to their experiences, and especially women and ethnic minorities as to what their experiences. And then also advocate. I mean, whatever country we're in right now, whether it's England, the US, Uganda, there's, you know, countries are opening up their borders to asylum seekers and refugees, or there's advocacy work to be done. So there's speeches online. I mean, you can access talking points on Instagram. You can access talking points on how to call your senators. So there's a lot of information out there. And I think we have so much power to, you know, especially in the US, advocate and, you know, demand action from our legislated officials and talk to them and say, why does it take 3.5 years for a special immigrant visa? An interpreter who's worked with the US for 7-8 years and risked his life, why does it take 3.5 years for him to get out safely, even though he's risked his life for us? And things like that, you know, you can do research and use facts, and you have the power to do so. And we're in a really fortunate place where we have the access to do that. And I think right now, especially, it's so important. And there's change being made, like day by day, things are changing with the State Department and Congress. So please, like, it's in such a dire situation right now, and we have the power to try and help people.
Oh gosh, like exactly as you say, like we have the power to do so. It's so easy, I think, you know, to be like, oh, this is history repeating itself, and, you know, there's nothing that can be done. It's a fallen state, and like we cite our other 5 fallen states.
Yeah.
You know, it's you lay out a plan, you give us like a true action item. I think everybody can find a way to listen to an Afghan voice. That, you know, that very step, that if each person took that, especially in the United States, especially as Americans, it would just start to develop an understanding of a very complex situation, of a complex region, that we really have a responsibility to try to understand better. Thank you for being like so practical with words of advice that actually are really, really seriously needed right now.
Yeah, and I'm doing the same thing. I mean, there's so many things I learned while in Afghanistan. And as a manager, you know, I was managing in a local organization. So there were so many things that I feel like I learned as well, as to maybe I don't have the answer to this question, or maybe it's approached through a different lens because I'm in a different country with different histories, a different culture as to how to approach issues. Or, you know, for example, there was COVID happening, like a third wave of COVID in Kabul. This was around like March, April. And, you know, it's the natural instinct is, okay, we're switching to remote work. No one's coming back into the office. In my mind, I'm like, okay, we're switching to remote work. But then again, going a step deeper and saying, one, there's no electricity. So how do we, the Taliban just blew up electric power lines in Kabul. So how do we make sure that our staff can work? A second layer, is it safe for them to work at home? You know, do they have the space? Do they have the resources? do they feel safe in their homes? I mean, we saw that cases of gender-based violence and violence against women actually increased in so many places while COVID was happening. So just thinking layer by layer as to, it's not just, okay, this is the solution. It's, there's deep layers as to how these things play out. So that was a learning lesson for me as well as a manager, as a person. And I think I'm still carrying that with me and, learning how to do that. So.
Thank you for sharing so deeply and so transparently. It helps all of us. I mean, I think it's easy for us to simplify things or believe that, if we do 1, 2, 3, then everything will be 4, 5, 6. And even just like this example of a very practical situation that we've all been through, right? Oh, it's COVID, work at home. Like, how does that actually play out in a country like Afghanistan? A lot of learning to be done by all of us. Adriana, one of the things that brought you to Afghanistan and also that, ties us together, and you've mentioned it, is, this idea of movement or sports, or if we generalize it, like some of the arts and the creative elements. Like, how is it that you kind of picked up on that as something that is interesting in international development? Where did kind of the arts or sports movements start in your life?
No, that's great. I think that we talk about like traveling and being in different places, but I mean, when you think about what unites people together, and if you have traveled to another country or even to another city in the US, like there's a chance that you felt out of place at some point, or you felt out of your comfort zone. But if you think about what brings people together, and, I could have a different religion than you, I could not speak the same language as you. What has brought me, to like actually be in a room with 15 Moroccans who I don't speak the same language as, or, be in a country like Afghanistan where I've never hiked in my life. Like, what is something that brings people together? It's sport, it's art, it's food specifically. So I think naturally, like when I've been in those situations, I'll navigate towards, in Morocco, I became across a local gym trainer, a fitness trainer, and he said to me, he's like, we have a sports class, an aerobics women's class happening, at night, you should come. And I was like, oh, amazing, I'm coming. And that was like just an experience where I had the opportunity to train for a year with like 10 Moroccan women who they all had children. I was obviously like the outlier, but it was like what brought us together. And with arts as well, I mean, through dance with Mindleaps, and through Free to Run with running, through Morocco with hiking and food, there's ways that people come together. And that has, to me, I've seen the most like change in youth and effective programs when you can kind of figure that out and bring people together from different backgrounds. So that's been what's incredible for me. And it's inspiring to see.
Yeah, this concept of unity, it's so true, right? It's on all levels. Like you say, it's like internationals are outsiders within another community, but also within communities that are diverse, and within ages, and, within different social economic classes. Yeah, it's really crazy how the unity can just build so much faster than when people have like books and pens and papers and like lots of different ideas and different
Yeah, and it's cool to be able to see, like, I feel like one of the challenges is in places, like Afghanistan, or places that it's not as easy to just gather in a public space and, use your voice or go on a run. It's so important to, for youth and for young people to be able to create those spaces, whatever they may look like, that, are safe spaces and respect different ideas and freedom of expression. And, we're seeing it all over the world. Where is that? Is it online? Is it, in a park? Where is it? But it's important, moving forward, especially as the world becomes more digital, to still be able to create places like a dance studio with Mindleaps, to, bring people together.
Yeah, it's true. It's the freedom of expression, right? It's unity, freedom of expression. And it doesn't take the resources that 12 years of education might take.
Exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
Adriana, it's tough to ask you this because you're still so young, but nonetheless, I mean, of all of the experience you've racked up and the depth of insight you have on like so many fascinating issues, I will still ask you the question. For people who are even younger than you,
Yeah.
what are some of the words of advice that you might have for them, especially people who are, maybe trying to, fight to bring unity, to bring new tools to international development, international relations, maybe are a little bit skeptical or jaded on
Mm-hmm.
the histories that we've seen recently. What are some of those like paths or words of advice or kind of like personal memories that you would
Mm-hmm.
pass on to them?
Yeah, I would say like there's obviously a different path for everyone as to, determining what you like and what you're interested in. But I think, again, like listening and then also, I mean, finding an issue or something that feels strongly to you. Is it climate change? Is it the environment? Is it refugee rights? Is it human rights? I mean, and trying to like put yourself in those spaces and listen to experts and listen to youth who were talking about it. I mean, one of the things that I remember was kind of like a spark in my mind was when after college I graduated from school and I was working on some sorts of like programming with the refugee community in Syracuse. But I just like felt that spark and that like I want to see this overseas and like
Mm-hmm.
understand, what this experience is, and going to Lebanon and working for a summer in a Palestinian refugee camp just opened my mind to this specific issue and, Palestinian refugees and rights and, diving deeper into that, being able to see it play out. I mean, kids who are born in Lebanon but are Palestinian and every day think they're going home to where they're from. And that was kind of like going and seeing that with my own eyes and having stories to write and youth to reference. When I came back to the US, it sparked in me like so many emotions like anger, passion, interest, and just like bouncing off that, then saying, okay, I can advocate for humanitarian aid in the US. I can go to Palestine and, take video and footage and like educate people in the US. So once you kind of like figure out what you're interested in, what your passion is, like there's a lot of ways to go from that. And there's a lot of resources. And the world is so digital now. So youth, I mean, have so many, there's opportunities for youth in Uganda to connect to Afghan youth and American youth. So that's a cool thing as well. If someone can figure out how to, create these exchanges overseas with bandwidth that won't cut you out every 5 minutes, let me know.
Well, if somebody's going to figure it out, I would hedge my bets on it being you, Adriana.
Nope, not me. Find an engineer or something.
Well, definitely. I mean, kind of the last series of guests that we've had on Moments with Mindleaps have really talked about how, experiences are abroad especially, but like really experiences out of your box, whatever your box
Yeah.
is, really can just like change the way that you think about every single phase in your life. It's that exposure, at whatever level is possible to you is just like really life changing. It certainly was for me as well.
Yeah, and I would say also, I mean, just connect. I think speaking to people and just putting yourself out there, like the way that I met Rebecca was through, like, this is just like a far-fetched connection of me waitressing on a woman for a year who ended up being on the board of something, connected me with someone else, and then introduced me to Rebecca. So, like, the connection came from like solely waitressing. And those are like, yeah, it's crazy. And those are times when it's like, okay, I can just like chat this person up even though I don't know them, or have a conversation, and you just never know where that could lead you, especially out of school or if you're in college or even in high school. Your professors, your mentors, someone in your community, you never know when people can help you. And I think I've personally like been so grateful to have people who have asked me questions and helped me along